Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me back on my channel, Hierarchy of Reads. My name is Tiffany and today is going to be kind of a casual, chatty catch-up video in which I'm going to kind of go over some of my reflections for the year 2019 and talk about some goals and channel plans I have for the year 2020. So if that's something that interests you, please stick around. Now, I don't know about you personally, but I can say, anecdotally speaking, 2019 was a very chaotic year full of so many high highs and also so many very low lows. And that doesn't seem to be just with me. I mean, of course, every single year we're going to have highs and lows. But in the people, in my immediate community even, a lot of very life-changing things seem to have happened in 2019. Perhaps it's just my age and my cohort, or perhaps it's just something in the air. But regardless, the year 2019 was quite profound for many people, and myself included. Among some of the challenges that I had in 2019, I think some of you know because I talked about it in previous videos, I lost my grandfather in December of 2018, and then a few months into 2019 I also lost my grandmother. And that was something that was very difficult for me personally to recover from because they were my very best friends, and it was really the first time that I had to deal with loss of people that were that close to me. And not only was it just one of them, but it was two of them back to back, and before then I had been taking care of them over the past couple of years, and so I saw a lot of their physical and cognitive decline, and so I don't know if any of you have gone through this experience yet, but if and ever when you do, you'll know that having to think about death of your loved ones and mortality in general and cognitive and physical and health decline in general, they're very serious topics that when you think about in an abstract, removed sense, doesn't really bother you that much, right? You can put it off till later. But sometimes you are confronted with the topic of death and mortality in such an extreme manner that you can't push it off until later. Those are some of the weightier topics that I was dealing with in the beginning of 2019. And then going on from there, I had to study for my GREs, which are the exams that we have to take in order to get into graduate school. And this presented a very strange challenge for me because I really had to acknowledge some of my own insecurities and weaknesses head on. I think that stress kind of brought back some insecurities I had that I had thought that I had dealt with and grown from, but clearly I hadn't. And that was my feelings of inadequacy and lack of intelligence. Ever since I was a young person, I remember just feeling like I wasn't very smart. And I don't know why I think this. To this day even, I struggle with this kind of preconceived notion of myself. And I think it's because although when I speak to people, sometimes people say that the vocabulary I use or the way I speak makes them think I sound intelligent, or the fact that I've always gotten good grades, those are kind of the traditional markers of somebody who is smart or intelligent. But in some ways, those just always make me feel worse about myself, like I've somehow tricked everybody into thinking that I am this uber intelligent person, and I'm not. I just don't feel that way. And I think it's because although I do well in traditional methods of testing intelligence or traditional methods of testing, somebody's skills, I'm not as creative as I'd like to be. I really admire individual thinkers, people with creative minds who take their own way of looking at something and integrate it into the traditional and existing body of knowledge and expand upon that. And that's never something that I have been able to do, at least not that I'm aware of. And so how this all plays out in 2019 was that for me, I was trying to study for my exams and trying to think about going into a doctoral program. It's very interesting because I come from a background where I didn't even think that I would attend college, or at least not get this far through college. And I never seriously thought that I would be contemplating working in my dream career field. And so I've kind of had to recalibrate and readjust my idea of who I am and what I'm capable of. And certainly when I was applying for the GRE, when I was taking and practicing the GRE, this applied because I was really struggling with that test preparation. The quantitative part is what I really struggled with, because ever since I was young, I've really struggled with math. But my main struggle is that I tell myself that I struggle with it, much like my main struggle in social interactions is that I tell myself that I'm shy and I'm awkward, and that makes me shy and awkward. And the same thing was very much true with my math practices for the GRE. I would approach a problem and struggle with it a little bit and just instantly kind of revert back to that mindset of, I can't do this, I'm stupid, I'm never going to be good at this, I'm never going to be able to get into a PhD program, you know. And I really struggled to kind of work myself out of that mentality. And so I did end up taking the GREs, and I did okay. I didn't do well enough to get into or even be considered for many of the doctoral programs that I applied to. And to be fair to myself, I didn't apply to many programs. Clinical psychology, I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but to get into a doctoral program in clinical psychology, I've heard is more competitive now than it is to get into med school. Again, I don't know if that's exactly true. That's what I've heard, but I do know regardless that it's extremely competitive. And they say, I think, to apply to at least like 13 to 20 graduate schools, and I applied to 3. So, you know, I didn't do myself a big favor there. But after all of that, I got, one school didn't even bother to respond to me. Another school told me I was rejected, and then I did end up, I did apply for a master's program, and I did get accepted into that. And so it was a very weird thing, because half of me was so excited to be part of this this master's program. And when I went to my interview for that program, it felt right. Perhaps that's cognitive dissonance speaking, but I genuinely think it just felt right, and it feels right. I'm in that program now, and I don't know how to explain it, but it feels right. But then the other half of me was also very down and hard on myself. Like, see, you couldn't do it. You can never get into a doctoral program. You can't, you know, you weren't smart enough. And so that was something that I really had to work on throughout 2019, was kind of rebuilding my self-esteem and rebuilding my confidence. And I didn't think that at the age of 28 and a half now, these are things that I thought I would have to be working on, but it's true. I mean, I think sometimes we tend to evaluate ourselves as compared to others, or as compared to these external standards. We get so caught up in this quantitative number, and sometimes we think that if we don't fall into a certain score, or we don't achieve or pass the test at our first try, then that means that we're invalid, we're incapable, we're incompetent. And none of that is true. And perhaps this is cliche to say, but perhaps it's cliche for a reason. I really am finding that the limits that I set for myself are the limits that hold me back the most. So again, that was something that I kind of had to rework through mentally, kind of in the year 2019. So those were some of the struggles that I faced in 2019, but the year was not all bad. In fact, overall, I don't even think most of it was bad. I can say that my boyfriend and I, we traveled a lot last year, and it was such an amazing experience. Again, I didn't ever think I would be the kind of person who would have the desire to, nor ability to travel and do things that are so adventurous. And so I just, number one, I feel so genuinely blessed to have those opportunities made available to me, and so blessed to have a partner that wants to do those things with me. And so we went to Tulum, Mexico was the first place that we went, and while we were there, we visited the ancient sites of Chichen Itza. We climbed Coba, which is one of the only pyramids, I think, in Mexico that you can climb, and that particularly was a really fun and helpful experience for me, because I'm terrified of heights. So I kind of had to get over that mental obstacle, kind of like with the past topic that I was just talking about not feeling like I can do things. I was starting to climb up the pyramid, and I got about halfway through, and I looked up and I saw how steep it was, and I thought, nope, 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 I'm turning back around. With the help of my partner, his encouragement, and then my just wanting to get over that sudden sense of inability to do things. I wanted to get to the top, so we climbed up to the top, and it was just such an exhilarating feeling for me to have gotten over that fear, up until the point that we had to climb down, because that was scary. I was pretty sure we were just going to set up and live there for the rest of our lives, because to go down was terrifying. And it was so funny too, because, you know, I'm up there, you know, feeling like I can hardly move or I'm going to fall over. Meanwhile, there's all these young people taking like Instagram photos on the edge of the pyramid, leaning over the stone staircase that is so steep. And I just thought to myself, I don't know how you all can do this, but kudos to you. So it was just a lovely experience. And then we also visited the archaeological sites of Tulum. And while we were there, I saw, I don't know his name, I need to look it up, but I saw one of the History Channel's documentary guys there, and it was so funny because I noticed him and I told my boyfriend, I was like, is that the guy? And like we were kind of following him around throughout the trip trying to make sure it was him, and I think towards the end he might have noticed that there were some creepers following him around, and so then I had to like kind of pretend like I wasn't being a creeper, but I was. So that was kind of an exciting experience. We had so much fun. We also learned though that we're not as young as we once were, and we need to schedule a little bit more time to rest in between. And then a couple months later, we went to Savannah, Georgia, which was a totally different experience, but just as enjoyable. Moving on to the year 2020, I do have a lot of goals that I plan to achieve. And first, I just want to insert a little thing here real quick. Can we just talk about the sudden trend of people just ragging on other people for making New Year's goals? Of course, it doesn't have to be a new year to make goals, but for a lot of people, we tend to think in terms of time. And so a new year feels like an easier way to perceive yourself as somebody new. And I agree that not many people start off the year or start off their goals with a plan set up to help them succeed. I think that we could be more of a service to one another if we advise other people or encourage them instead of making fun of them for their efforts to become better versions of themselves, however they see that to be. It's just something that I kind of find annoying. But anyways, so I do have goals for 2020. As far as it applies to Booktube, I do want to start uploading more often, although I'm going to say it here and now, I am no longer going to even attempt to create or maintain a regular upload schedule. For me, I have so many things in my life that are regimented and scheduled and I have to do, that when I started to think of Booktube that way, I hated it. I didn't want to make any videos. It became something that when I thought about doing, I just felt grumpy and annoyed by it. And that's part of the reason why I stayed away from filming for so long, because it felt like a chore and I didn't want it to feel like a chore. So I'm no longer going to even try to do that, and I'm personally okay with that, and I hope you all are too, because it's the way it's going to be. Yeah, I'm just going to make videos when I can and when I feel like it, about what I feel like too, because that was another thing for me that I found was difficult, was that there are so many booktubers who come on here and they have such intelligent things to say about the books that they read. Either they come from backgrounds of literature, or they have other kinds of knowledge that really help them dissect the literature in a specific way. And oftentimes, to be honest, I would feel inferior to them. I would see their videos about books that I had read, for instance, and think, oh my gosh, I didn't get that out of that book. I could never sound that erudite, and I could never have gotten that and made that connection. And I felt like, oh, that must mean that my contributions aren't valuable. And maybe that's true. Maybe they're not valuable. But regardless, I enjoy talking about books, and although I don't come from a background of literature, meaning I didn't study it, and I don't make all the connections that maybe an intellectual would, but it doesn't necessarily mean that my perspective is completely valueless. So going into 2020 again, I do want to kind of focus on just allowing myself to bring my perspective as is without feeling pressured to turn my voice into somebody else's voice. And I also want to feel free to make the content that I want. Sometimes I don't just want to talk about books. Sometimes I want to talk about psychology or current topics and how psychology applies to that. Not so much in a preachy way. My goal is not to create videos and tell you all my opinions and tell you why you should think like me, but rather to talk about different topics that are relevant to our current life and talk about the kinds of things that I think we should consider and ask you all what kinds of things I might be missing out that you think I should consider. That's really something I want to bring to my channel and kind of to just my conversations in general. And so I'm hoping to do that in 2020. What about you all? I'd love to know what your New Year's resolutions are or goals in general and how you plan to achieve them if you're interested in sharing. Regardless, I know that you'll be amazing and that you can do everything that you want to, and I'm here rooting for you. But that is all I have for you today. I look forward to seeing you in my next video, and until then, be well.